The Department of Physical Education, in cooperation with Fatima Bint Mubarak Ladies Sports Academy, is pleased to welcome you all in today's lecture entitled Physical Activity for Health Promotion, the Science and Practice. I would like to invite Ms. Shayma Al-Sayari, the representative from Fatima Bint Mubarak Ladies Sports Academy, to give her remark speech.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Shayma Khalid from Fatima Bint Mubarak Ladies Sports Academy from Training Program. We are very happy to organize this section under title Physical Activity for Health Promotion, the Science and Practice, presented by Dr. George Nassis. We hope you enjoyed this lecture and the valuable information that is going to be shared by Dr. George Nassis. During the lecture, the questionnaire will be shared in the chat. We hope that you will fill out the questionnaire and will receive a certificate of participation. And thank you.
And now let's start our lecture presented by Dr. George Nassis, the Chair of Physical Education Department, College of Education in UAE University, who will talk about the physical activity and health promotion and how individuals and families can increase physical activity and improve healthy lifestyle.
A big thank you to Fatima Bint Mubarak Ladies Sports Academy for this invitation. This is a great opportunity for all of us, both the Fatima Bint Mubarak Ladies Sports Academy and also the UAE University, to celebrate the National Sports Day. And as you probably know, the National Sports Day is on the 2nd of March, and we do celebrate today and tomorrow with the event that is going to follow. We are going to celebrate this day, which is a special occasion to remind people and relaunch a campaign, an awareness campaign about the role of physical activity and exercise on health for all ages, for all people. And this is going to be also the nature of my presentation. Unfortunately, I apologize. This presentation is going to be on the theoretical aspect, but also bringing some practical examples and some advices. Allow me to say and recommend to you, as soon as we finish, to go out and do some exercise. Today is a wonderful weather. This weather will encourage all of us to take some activity outdoor today. So do not forget. So I'm going to give you some information on science, but do not forget to practice. I'm sure you know the main benefits of physical activity. And this nice slide presents the summary of the evidence about the role of physical activity on various domains of our life. And I'm sure you have heard that physical activity reduces the risk of dying early, the risk of mortality. It also reduces the risk for cardiovascular disease and also the risk of cancer. And there is a lot of evidence to support this information. Allow me also to share with you this information from the World Health Organization about the leading cause of death globally. The leading causes of death are the heart diseases, the diseases of the cardiovascular system that may affect the heart, but they may also affect the brain. And in this case, we are talking about stroke. The leading cause of death have been highlighted, and as you can see with the dots, the open cycle dots represent the occurrence, the number of these deaths in 2000, and the closed, the filled dots represent the number of those deaths in 2019. And as you can see, for example, for the ischemic heart disease, this number has increased globally from around 7 million people to 9. So this is a very big increase in the number of deaths. We do also know that physical activity can prevent at least some of these deaths. But then the question is why people do not exercise. Any feedback from your side? Why don't we exercise? If you would like, you can share your thoughts on the chat. Despite the plethora of evidence, the plethora of information about the beneficial role of exercise, people, or at least the majority of people, do not take exercise regularly. What may happen? What may be the causes for this, let's say, resistance towards a better, a healthier lifestyle? So motivation could be a reason. I'm sure you're in a position to share different experiences from your personal life. It could be the lack of time. There might be a plethora of reasons, but the truth is that despite the fact that we know the positive effects of exercise on health, we as human beings, we are showing a kind of resistance into sticking into a healthier lifestyle. Could it be because we are getting out of our comfort zone? It could be. As I said before, there is a number of reasons, and motivation is one of these reasons. And my colleague, Dr. Aracho, will share with you more information tomorrow. I invite you also to join this lecture, which is about the self-determination theory perspective, and with the perspective of trying to answer the question, what makes us physically active? But this is how the WHO, the World Health Organization, is perceiving our relatively modest engagement to regular physical exercise, physical activity. And what the World Health Organization is suggesting is that we focus on 4 main areas. One area is on how to create active societies. Active societies means building a culture of regular physical activity. This series of talks that we are doing together with Fatima Bint Mubarak, let's say, can be a vehicle towards more active societies. Active environments. This is another domain that we can work further in order to improve physical fitness. We are very privileged to live in a country where active environment is indeed the case. Because if you see in the city we are in Al Ain, there are many pathways, there are many opportunities to do exercise, even routes for cycling. The same is happening in Abu Dhabi, and I'm sure in other locations within the UAE. So this is under this umbrella of how to create more active environment. Active systems is about getting together all the stakeholders in a more synchronized, in a more organized manner in terms of making people aware about the benefits of exercise, and also create the opportunity for the people to exercise by implementing, for instance, classes, health, physical activity classes. An example is what is happening here in the United Arab Emirates University, where a respective department under the HR, the Human Resources Department, has implemented an initiative of wellness and physical activity in some mornings of the week for the staff. This is about an initiative towards creating more active systems. Another domain is how to create active people. It is indeed the responsibility of each one of them to take care of his and her health. So it is also our responsibility to convince ourselves and create the opportunities for ourselves to do more physical activity. How much physical activity should I do? If I remain into the last domain now, which is about active people, I would like to share with you what science says. In this slide, you may be able to see on the horizontal axis the activity and the fitness level, starting from the left, from inactive to more active or to very active on the right-hand side of this graph of the horizontal axis. On the vertical axis, you can see the risk of chronic disease and premature death from low to high. And this is the curve. The first point is on the upper left of this curve. If you see, if a person is inactive or unfit, the risk of premature death is high. And if you then look at this curve, as the person is getting more active, even with the adding small amounts of activity, moving from inactive to more active, going towards the right-hand side, you see that there is a dramatic decline in the risk of premature death. Even small changes in our everyday life can have substantial impact on the risk of premature death. And these small changes are related to taking more physical activity. The change that I have implemented is to walk most of the time in the campus. Another change I have implemented is to use the stairs instead of taking the elevator. These are small changes that we can make in our life and can have a substantial impact on the risk of premature death and also on health-related factors. I know that people need more evidence to be convinced. And for those that want more hard evidence on that, this is a very recent paper that has been published in one of the most prestigious journals, the British Journal of Sports Medicine. And actually, this analysis, this paper shows that there is a dose-response association up to a limit between the level of physical activity and fitness and the risk of death from cardiovascular diseases and also from cancer. Dose-response relation means, as the slide showed, the previous one, that if we are able to make a small change, this is going to have an impact. If we can we're able to make more changes towards the beneficial side of getting more physically active, this is going to have an additional. Of course, again, keep this in mind, up to a limit, as we are going to discuss later. The message from WHO is that we need to activate ourselves. We need to do more. We need to move more, everywhere, every time, every day. All right, this is the meaning of this video. And indeed, the first study on this, the first evidence came back in 1953, more than almost 70 years from now. This research has been published in a very prestigious journal, The Lancet. And the investigators have investigated the drivers of London's double-decker buses and also the people who are collecting the tickets, the conductors. The drivers are sitting during their shift, the 8 to 9 hour shift, whereas the conductors, they used to move up and down in the double-decker buses in order to receive the payments and issue the tickets. So they are doing more physical activity compared to the drivers. And what they have found, and many years ago, as I said, as the first evidence, was that the conductors had a higher risk of premature death compared to the drivers. Putting it another way, those who were doing physical activity, the conductors, had a lower risk of premature death due to cardiovascular disease, and this was assumed to be due to the healthier lifestyle that the conductors had assumed. What we do know now, within these 70 years of research, we do know that being fit is an independent protective factor for health. That means that if a person is fit, irrespective of some other characteristics, this person has a benefit for his or her health, independent of some other characteristics. And allow me to share some evidence that we have collected in the laboratory I was working a few years ago, and we have published in a number of journals. In this study that I'm sharing with you now, we had overweight and obese children that had receiving training from us for 3 months, 3 times per week. Before the 3-month program and at the end of the 3-month program, we determined their body composition with very sophisticated methods, and we had also analyzed their carbohydrate profile by doing the so-called oral glucose test. That was before and after the 3 months of training. And when we measured their body composition, the finding was that there was no change in body weight and in body fat. And this was because the period of training of 3 months was too short. But despite this fact, despite the absence of change in the body weight in these overweight and obese girls, the metabolic profile had improved substantially. And that's the key message from there, that it is being physically active is key to health promotion. And that's the second message, is that doing physical activity regularly is an independent and strong factor that can protect our health. Of course, this has been justified in other studies, and this is in a very prestigious journal, the so-called New England Journal of Medicine, which is a very famous journal, and they had measured people's level of cholesterol, like HDL. For those that remember the basic knowledge, HDL is the good cholesterol. So we want HDL to increase because it has a protective factor to health. And as you can see, they had people in different groups, people who are not doing exercise control, and people who are doing different amounts of exercise in the list in the last three columns here. And as you can see, as we go from left to right, there is an increase in the bar, which means that with people doing more physical activity, there is an added effect on HDL in this case, but also in other protective factors. But we should not misunderstand the point. Yes, doing physical activity can be beneficial to health, but allow me to show you again this slide that I showed to you before, which describes on the horizontal axis the activity and fitness level of a person and the risk of premature death, and remind you of the curve. And if I can guide you to look on the right-hand side, you see that by doing extremely high amount of exercise is not always beneficial. So, and this links with what I said before, that doing physical activity is good. There is a dose response. The more we do, the better. And you remember when I said up to a limit, no need to overdo. Modesty is the key word again. Physical activity has many benefits, both to physical health, but also to mental health, to quality of life, to the sense of well-being. Is it important to be also mentally fit or mentally healthy? What do you feel? How do you feel when doing exercise? Do you feel better after doing exercise? Is exercise having an impact on how do you feel? All right, yes. It appears, yes, I see a response in the chat. Indeed, doing exercise can affect all the different dimensions of health and wellness, because health and wellness is not about the physical dimension. It's also about the emotional, the intellectual, the social dimension. And this is a very nice summary of the mental health benefits of exercise and physical activity. And as you can see, physical activity can reduce the feelings of depression and stress. We are stressed in our everyday life. Some of people that we know or some who we don't know, they facing symptoms of depression. Physical activity can help in this condition. Physical activity can enhance the mood and the overall emotional well-being, can increase the energy levels, and can improve sleep. I hope you know how important it is to sleep well and have enough sleep. And we did another event last Thursday. The point here is that doing physical activity can improve our sleep. And indeed, there is a number of studies, again, for those who have a specific interest into looking into more research. This is a nice paper that was published recently, again, in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, showing that exercise has been proven to be effective in treating depression and depressive symptoms. This exercise can be either supervised or unsupervised, can be In groups, it can be of aerobic type. What do we mean by saying aerobic type? What is the exercise that can be considered as aerobic? Running, walking can be another type. Cycling in a very relaxed manner, that's another type of aerobic exercise. I see more people typing. What is the best advice to yourself for doing exercise? Which exercise is the best for you? Any advice? What exercise is the best for you? That the best exercise is the exercise we like. It is the exercise that we like. What is the exercise type, or what is the activity that makes you feeling good? So that's what you can do. The best thing is to exercise regularly. In order to be able to exercise regularly, we should choose the type, the mode of exercise that we like the most. This exercise mode may change. One day I may feel good doing running. The other day I may like playing some football or whatever, walking. That's a fantastic idea. Yes, you are right. You can choose the exercise that you are enjoying the most. That's the best advice. The people, when the students did exercise, they are able, after 20 minutes of walking, the circulation in their brain has increased substantially, and this has been translated into better academic performance. So physical activity can improve academic performance. And indeed, if this is being conducted for months, and this is the result of another study that has followed the children for 9 months, and on the left-hand side, you can see the brain, the blood flow in the brain before and the blood flow in the brain after. You can see on the upper, on the first pictures, you can see the fit kids or the intervention group. They have showed substantial increase in the circulation of the blood in the brain. So the school, the curriculum of physical education in the school must emphasize physical activity. I know that we do have online people who are working in the school. The recommendation is that we create the opportunity for our students to move most of the time of the class. Yes, we want to also deliver skill acquisition exercise. We want them to learn some skills, but do not forget that we need to create opportunities for them for more movement, more action. Other people are working with adults. And this is another study with adults, again with the brain scanning after physical activity. And as you can see, these studies have shown that physical activity, moderate or harder type, can help the brain maintain the brain health of the population. And allow me to say that the brain health is an issue for those that are, for the elderly, that may suffer in some cases of diseases of the brain function. And it seems that physical activity can maintain the brain health for longer. Regular physical activity can also help cancer patients. And this is a theory that has been put forward a couple of years ago, and there have been now studies conducted. And this theory, which remains to be proven with more human participants, says that when people who are in chemotherapy are doing some physical activity, they can benefit more from the chemotherapy compared to the patients under chemotherapy who are not doing physical activity. This is another open window in research that may shed some light and indeed help the clinical population a lot. Every move counts. That's the slogan from the World Health Organization. This is another, again, a slide from the World Health Organization giving some advices of doing exercise. The advice, starting from left going to the right, is to limit the sedentary time, the time that we spend sitting, watching TV, playing with our smartphones and replace this time with more physical activity. Any type of activity. Doing something is better from nothing. Any is better than none. So any type of physical activity. For those that have the capacity to do more physical activity, adults and older adults, if they're able to reach 150 minutes per week, up to 300, that's fantastic. But do not forget, doing something is better from doing nothing. This is a target. The 150 minutes per week is the target for those that have already progressed in their plans. For children and adolescents, the recommendation is to accumulate at least 60 minutes per day. And this is fundamental because this routine will ensure that the next generation is going to be a healthy generation. Also, for adults, it is recommended to include 2 days, at least 2 days per week, of muscle strengthening exercise. And for the older adults, to include also some balance exercise, because the older adults are at risk of falls, and we need to protect them. More is better. Do as much as you can, but do not forget that is for those that do not have experience into exercise or physical activity. Do not forget that doing something is better from doing nothing. And allow me to share, and I hope this now works, the guidelines from the Canadian Society that actually, in a very smart way, is capturing much of this information. This video refers to another population, so we need to find the right activities for our own setting. So let's say here the challenge is the weather in the summer. What can we do to maintain physical activity in the summertime? Any ideas? What can we do to maintain physical activity in the summertime in our setting? Exercise indoor. Yes, we can exercise indoor. We can adopt a lifestyle of walking in the malls. This is something that we can do. So we need to adjust our pace. We need to indoor activities to include indoor activities and find the solution. Summer camps. Thank you very much for sharing also your idea. Much appreciated. So the idea is how we can adapt into this situation, which is a challenging one indeed. Let me conclude by saying that I hope you are convinced, not only from this presentation, but also from information that we receive from other sources, that physical activity can be beneficial to both physical and mental health for all people of all ages. A common element that we should not forget is the need to move more and try to include physical activity in our schedule as many times per week as possible. Today, after this talk, I'm going to go out for a run. It's beautiful weather. So let's try and adopt this as a habit. Do not forget that every move counts. So doing something is better from doing nothing.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. On the occasion of UAE National Sports Day, which happening on the 2nd of March every year, the Department of Physical Education, in cooperation with Fatima Bint Mubarak Ladies Sport Academy, is pleased to welcome you all in today's webinar entitled Self-Determination Theory Perspective: What Makes Us Physically Active? Presented by Dr. Arto, Associate Professor in Physical Education Department, College of Education in UAE University. The purpose of this presentation is to provide insight into exercise motivation based on the research findings on self-determination theory, the leading theory in the field of human motivation and functioning.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm very honored for this invitation from Fatima Bint Mubarak Ladies Sports Academy. So what makes us physically active? This topic fits really well for today, as the day is focused on promoting physical activity and fitness in the UAE population. What really makes us physically active? Why some people are not that active than some others in generally, and a bit background for that, giving an idea like probably what we could maybe change in our behavior, that a bigger part of the population would be physically active enough. My presentation today, I will start with a bit reviewing the challenges like what we face today in terms of physical activity and exercise. And then we will check a few indicators about health and physical activity behavior today, especially here in the UAE. And then I will present you shortly the self-determination theory and the components of the theory, and find out like what really makes us physically active. And few tips maybe that how to change the behavior, like what we can do to probably to improve our physical activity and exercise levels, and to conclude what did we learn from this lesson. I really hope that you will get some ideas maybe change if you think that there's something that you could improve in your physical activity behavior or in the family or any other neighborhood, that we can really together try to put this nation and population to be more active and at the same time improve our health and well-being. And yeah, as Ms. Alanu told, that if you have any questions, just drop there on the chat box. To start with, like think about the challenges of this 21st century first, like how our life has changed in past 20-30 years. So if we think about life in this country like some decades ago, I'm sure that it's very different where we are living now, and this is basically happening everywhere in the world. So it's not, if we say health related problems, they don't only exist here in the UAE, where all the world's different countries in the world, they are facing them. First thing, that if we think about like health and physical activity, food is something that for sure it has changed in, and it's basically everywhere. Now there are lots of food available, and 24/7 you can order home. There is not that much physical effort that you need to do to get daily meal. And then if you think about like some decades ago, people probably still were like growing their own food, and the life was very different. The food came from the behind your house, or you grew yourself like your vegetables and so on. But now it's very easy to access food sources. Restaurants are open almost the whole day, and you can, as I said, you can order very easily to home. Most countries it's like this, but of course we understand that there are lots of differences, of course, between the continents and between countries, but in general in most countries this has changed a lot. And also the quality of food, that we tend to have this like fast food culture, which is really strong nowadays. You can make healthy choices for sure, but also like this fast food options, they are like very easy to access, and you can just go there and get your lunch in 1 minute. So these are of course the real changes that has happened in our lives. But then one thing that I want to bring up is this, like how much time we spend in sedentary time during the whole day. If you think about yourself, like most of us, maybe we come to work by car, and then the work days are very much that we are seated, and also that when after work we go home, it's again being in the car, and then maybe at home what we do, have dinner, watch TV, this sort of things. Of course, they are very much this sedentary based, and this has changed massively in past 20-30 years. And as an example, I can give like my grandparents. My grandmother was passed away more than 10 years ago, but it's like that generation, they had a tiny farm there back in Finland, where I come from, and they had to really be active the whole day when they were doing their tiny things on this farm. It was the intensity of the activities was not all the time the highest, but they were somehow on the move the whole day. And if we think about now in any country, lots of our activities, they are like sedentary based. And this is one big issue in addition to this lack of physical activity that we should somehow try to face and solve this problem before it gets too big. I mentioned already the cars. The transportation has changed a lot, like in old times, especially in this country. I think this sort of scenes were more common, but probably now not many need to come to work active ways. So we drive cars or take the taxis, something that we don't need to be physically active ourselves. And of course, this is in the long terms, this is a lot easier, make things easier. But if we think about this health perspective, it's not all positive what happens. So it's not all, we cannot always say that the development is always positive, even though it, of course, it makes our lives a lot easier. Physical activities and exercises, of course, this amount has also decreased in, if we think about the whole populations, like from young children to adults, these voluntary activities, these have decreased as well. So this is a combination, like this lots of sedentary time at not that much physical activity, and this is like as a combination, it's really harmful for our health. And finally, what we do, it relates very much to sedentary time, that we use lots of these electronic devices, cell phones, tablets, TV, and this takes time from some other things that if you think about our grandparents mostly, that at that time probably they didn't even have many of these devices. So less time is spent in an active way and more time spent with this sort of with devices, which is like makes of course people even less active. You have heard for sure about this sort of active video games, and this is like some sort of answer to that even these devices could be used for being a bit more active, but of course this will never be exactly the same like what we used to, how the people used to live in some 20-30 years ago. And of course these are positive things that these manufacturers, they have started to prepare like these active games, but it's not going to solve the whole thing itself. But all these health related factors, when we put together, of course this brings certain health problems, even at the same time it makes our lives easier. But in terms of health and well-being, of course these are really problematic. And also, like if you think about like your daily life, like even though you would be physically active and exercising, like maybe this what they recommend about 1 hour per day, but if we are like very long time of the day we are still seated, we have lots of sedentary time, it's a bad news that it's not going to compensate this 1 hour activity. It's, as my colleague Dr. George yesterday said, that any activity is better than nothing, which is 100% true. But still, if we spend the whole day being seated, this our, for example, 1 hour activity, it doesn't compensate that totally. And this is exactly where soon will we talk about this motivation, because we are human body, it's a like very beautiful mechanism how it works, and it's like we have our physical body and also the brain. If we can say it this way, the brain is the problematic part, because if our body would make this choices like very often in terms of physical exercise, physical activity, or this sedentary time, probably body would select a bit different way. But when our brain is ruling the thing or controlling, that will make the things a bit complicated and not always good for the health and well-being. Some positive news, I have been thinking this a lot. Probably the evolution will do the job, that by the time this evolution takes place, and maybe our bodies will adapt to this, that we have lots of sedentary time and maybe not that much lack of physical activity. The evolution will do the job, that we will adapt for that. But bad news is that it doesn't help us. We need to do it now, because it's gonna take, who knows, 10,000 years, 50,000 years. So we cannot wait for that. So we need to basically start today. And what would be the better day to start as the UAE National Sports Day? Some figures and numbers of this, what is the situation in this country, like this is from very recent research that the UAE has one of the highest prevalence of type 2 diabetes in the world. So almost 16.2, almost 16, a bit more than 16% of the people of adult population has type 2 diabetes. And it's a really, if you think about the population, is it, according to my understanding, it's a bit less than 10 million currently. It's a bit more than 9 million people. It's quite high rate. And it's mainly because of this lack of physical activity and lots of sedentary time. Those are the main reasons behind this type 2 diabetes. Also, diet, of course, comes as well, but it's mainly this, many of these diseases like this type 2 diabetes, it's called hypokinetic diseases, which is the reason is a lack of physical activity. Developing the situation that currently it has been estimated that, now I'm talking about adult population, that 1 in 5 Emirati people have this type 2 diabetes condition currently, but this has been expected to double by 2040 if we don't change anything. So these are like very alarming numbers that we really should wake up with this. And with the good news is that in the UAE there's lots of potential and resources, and I think even will for people to change this. I teach health and school and community health here at the university, and we have, with my students, we have been checking that government programs, and there are lots of things are happening, but of course changes don't happen very quickly, but at least like many things that we people like individuals can do. Of course, this is also kind of alarming that almost a bit more than 40% of adults at this age group are unaware that they have this diabetes condition. And it's very often the problem with many of these hypokinetic diseases like high cholesterol, high blood pressure, or type 2 diabetes, that you don't get any warnings when you get, maybe your body starts to tell you that not everything is right. It's sort of late already, and especially this, if you think about just cholesterol and blood pressure, we cannot feel that. It just tells that when we measure, then we know what's the real situation. Maybe type 2 diabetes can be a bit more like give some marks before it's diagnosed, but still like it's a very large percent that people are still like unaware that they have this. And mostly of all of this, they are because of lack of physical activity. Very similar that my colleague yesterday showed that this, if we just slowly, I'm not going to go very deep with this, but these health benefits and risk and harms, they depends the amount of the physical activity. And World Health Organization, it recommends for the adults that we should receive every week like 150 to 300 minutes of moderate level physical activity, or 75 minutes of vigorous physical activity. And this moderate activity would be like brisk walking and maybe biking, increases your heart rate till that you can talk. And then vigorous activity would be, of course, a bit higher heart rate, that then you cannot do vigorous activities like for the very long time. But anyways, these sort of activities you should do on the weekly basis, that you get the minimum health benefits. This is not only that you will improve your physical fitness, but you will get the minimum health benefits if you receive this amount of physical activity per week. And the benefits and risks, they go somehow a bit like hand in hand. When your physical activity minutes increase, you at a certain point you get the benefits, but then it starts to like be stable. And on the other hand, the risks and harms, like for example injuries, can show up if you get more than that, but lots of individual differences. So we wouldn't be this 300 minutes, for example. I think that most of the people, this is not the problem, because many people, they don't receive even this 150 minutes. So we shouldn't be too worried about these risks and harms. So we should focus that at least we can receive this recommendation. This physical activity behavior in the UAE, there are not too many data published in the UAE population, but so far what we know already that there is, at least I found these two studies, that this was in college student population, but they were adults already. Like it was self-report study, and there was like 58% reported that they are physically inactive, that they don't achieve this 150 to 300 minute minimum recommendation in a week. And then I found another study that it said that 71% of Emirati adults are with insufficient physical activity. And this is like nationally representative study, and it's alarming numbers that this amount of people, they don't get enough physical activity based on this 150 to 300 minute recommendation. And of course, we understand very well that these are very much related to these health problems that I just showed in the very beginning. And this is the big problem, that both males and females spend about 80% of their waking hours in sedentary behavior. And this is exactly what I was saying in the very beginning, that not only that we increase our physical activity levels, but we should make sure that we also got out of this sedentary behavior. So these two things, they also go together. So it's a combination of this, as I said earlier, that if you are seated 80% of your waking hours, for example, this 1 hour active time in the evening, it doesn't compensate the whole day. Still, there are lots of research currently going on with this sedentary time. There is lots of things that people still don't know, we don't know, but we don't have still like recommendation for this sedentary time, just because there are no studies relating to the sedentary time. So these are very clear, these physical activity guidelines and these recommendations. There are lots of research gaps in this sedentary time, and probably I would guess that in next 5 years maybe we will have something that we can recommend that this amount of sedentary time is harmful, that you should avoid this. But there is not truly clear evidence yet, like what would be the amount of sedentary time which is still acceptable. And this figure here, it's about very large worldwide study. It was published 2018, sorry, and it shows like the colors of the different countries, how the people achieve these physical activity guidelines. The UAE, this is UAE women 2016. The data was collected 2016, and UAE women are here on this 40 to 50, about 50% of UAE women are physically inactive, and very much similar. And all these Gulf countries, they are almost in the same category here, and of course Latin America, for example, in the States, and many countries in the Europe, exactly the same situation. But still, like, more could be done, put people to be more active. Males in the UAE, it was in this category, like 30 to 40% of males are inactive in this worldwide study. But this is like very interesting, of course, a bit compared to different parts of the world, but in general, like telling the same story as these national studies here, that people need to be more physically active. The big question for today, like, what makes us physically active? Motivation is one thing that I was after, and it's behind someone is going to work like in a physically active way, like maybe walking or biking, these sort of things. And there is always, like, of course, something what makes really us to move. The motivation is the main factor there, that what makes us to do things. So this motivation comes from this Latin word movere, which means to move. And this I will explain you soon, like what does it mean, this intrinsic motivation. But this is the main factor there. And if you think about any human function, this motivation is the one that really like makes us to do things. And in exercise and physical activity, of course, it's especially important that there is some motivator behind our all actions, our behavior, that what drives us to do things. Intrinsic motivation is something that comes from you, so it doesn't like someone else doesn't affect on that. So you do things that you get some satisfaction, enjoyment, or joy out of. This is like pure intrinsic motivation, and this is exactly the one of the main element of this self-determination theory. You are the one where all these actions or behavior, it's like this comes intrinsically from you, not somewhere else. And this exactly intrinsic motivation is the thing that we do things because we want to get enjoyment, joy, or happiness. This like positive, anything that positive related to that. And I will tell soon also like what is opposite to intrinsic motivation. But if we think about regular physical activity, this is the one that makes you to move regularly. If we have been asking them about regular physical activity, those children and adolescents, they have really high intrinsic motivation to do certain activities or exercises. And this in many studies, it has been shown that this also relates, of course, in adults the same way. And when someone is intrinsically motivated toward any action, you can think about like any other, if you enjoy music or playing an instrument, or even you like cooking, if you are intrinsically motivated, you do the things because you really feel that it's fun, and not that you get some reward or there is any pressure or any other this sort of motivator behind, but you just do because you get joy and enjoyment because of the activity. And this would be, of course, very interesting if we want to be more physically active, to find the way how we can feel intrinsically motivated. And I will soon tell a bit like how this can happen. But in general, this is, as I said, the main reason why maybe some other people are more physically active than some others. And then I didn't write it here, but opposite for this would be extrinsic motivation, which is also, it's very powerful motivator as well, and type of motivation. But then it means that we do actions, the motivations comes from somewhere else. And this could be an example, like when we have a health condition, let's say high blood pressure, and we go to see the doctor in the hospital or clinic. The doctor tells that if you don't change your behavior, you will have this health condition, and doctor gives you the final warning that if you don't change your behavior now, physical behavior, you will have this and that. That would be like, if you start to change your behavior, that could be an example of extrinsic motivation. It can be equally good and powerful for changing behavior, but if in general, this intrinsic motivation, of course, it's more positive terms than if we compare to this extrinsic motivation, which also makes us, for example, to be physically active, but there is no guarantee that what happens then, for in this example, that you have a high blood pressure and the doctor tells you to change your behavior. You can do it for a while, but then if the blood pressure you will reach the normal level. What happens after that if you are extrinsically motivated? So there is not such motivator anymore. And this intrinsic motivation, it's like this requires, according to the self-determination theory, 3 different components. To feel intrinsically motivated, you need to have autonomy to do and make the choice what you do. If we think about physical activity and exercise, Dr. George yesterday mentioned this, that do the activities that you find which are fun and you enjoy them, and this is exactly about that. So if you are not this runner type, for example, and you try to force yourself to run and run and run, it's not going to happen for a very long time. And this is probably all of you know this, that when it's after New Year's, people make this new, that this year I'm going to change my diet or my physical activity, exercise habits. It normally takes 2 weeks and they are back to normal. Because if you are trying to do things which are not, it doesn't come from you. You are just thinking that they are probably good. You think that they are good for you, but it's really difficult to follow if you force yourself to do things that you are not used to. Slowly you can learn. If you want to take like small steps, you can even learn to like running if you are not a runner type. But this autonomy means that you can have choice to do the selections. But remember that in terms of health, it's not if the selection is running or staying on the sofa. It's not, even though it's a choice, but of course not all choices are healthy ones. But let's try to focus on these healthy choices. So if you try to look for an activity or exercise that you at least somehow you can say that you enjoy. And there are plenty of different options for that. And here we can say that any activity is better than nothing. So we cannot always think that only running or going to the gym is the real sport. There are many other things that what we can do, but try to look for something and maybe try different things that you feel that you get at least at some level you enjoy that. Then there is opportunity to have like something life changes that you can follow that the rest of your life. And second element would be this competence. So it means that you have tried to look some activity that where you feel that you are good at. So I always use this, my own example is like playing a piano, because I am not in the teacher's college. I had to take these classes. I finished all my exams. I passed the whole course, but it wasn't like it wasn't my thing. But main reason was because I didn't feel any competency there. So it was really difficult. It was purely extrinsic motivation what I was doing there. And I always try to think this way about, for some people, exercise and physical activity can be exactly the same thing. And that has helped me to understand a bit how these things go in the motivational point of view. But try to look for something that where you are good enough, but also the activity should be a bit challenging. If you select too easy exercises, then it can be that you give up easily, because you can do this very easily. So anything that you do, you should get some feelings that you succeed, not do difficult things in the very beginning. And if you think about this like changing the life, not trying to reach too much at the time. Small steps are the ones that you feed your motivation all the time when you reach something, but it's not too easy. And finally, there is this social relatedness. It means that all of us, we have as humans, we want to be a part of the group. And that can make, like, if you belong to a group that you go to, for example, some group activities, those are the ones that also feed your motivation, that you feel that it's a lot easier if you have let's say, you go to a nice walk 2-3 times per week with your friend. It's a lot easier to say, I'm not going today, if you are trying to do the same activity only alone. But if you have a friend there waiting that you are going to have this your daily routine, it's more difficult to say no, because you know that your friend is waiting for you there for the activity. And this sort of things, like in a long run, of course, they are really important. And if we think about this regular activity, so this somehow to be as a part of group, but remember there are lots of course, individual differences. Someone wants to maybe work alone, and someone wants to be in a big group, maybe smaller group, maybe with a friend. But these are all relative. But according to this research, these three different components are the ones that create and form this our intrinsic motivation. And if we take a look over a bit bigger picture, like how these things work in this physical activity behavior, that first we have here need supportive exercise settings. It means that, for example, in a group we could have like this, like we have a nice group where we focus on learning and enjoying doing the activity together rather than, for example, competing and trying to beat other players. Competition is always important part of sport and this sort of things, but not like it can be also sometimes it can be too much and it can kill this motivation if this, especially if you just think about physical activity and exercise to doing for your own fun. So competition is, it's good. We cannot say it's better not to avoid totally, but not too much. A certain level of competition is good, but of course, like in terms of motivation, individuals should like some of us are more like this, like who maybe likes more competition and maybe some others are not. So to find the thing that which suits for you. Where it comes to these orientations, so to feel competence, some of us are the types that you feel successful when you do the activities where you can learn, for example, new things, you can achieve your goals, or you get like exactly these feelings of excitement, enjoyment, joy. Orientations can be this sort of task orientation where you are exactly focused on this, like learning new things and enjoyment, fun. On the other hand, some people, they get competence when they compete and they are the best in the group and they win the race or any competition. They get there. We are individuals also in that sense that we get the feelings of competence we get from the different sources. And that's important somehow to understand that what is your type. If you are not this type that you get your competence or motivation you get from competitions, then maybe try to avoid a bit those sort of activities and do more like where you enjoy this learning and enjoyment thing. But remember always this enjoyment, it's the one that it doesn't mean that you select then staying on the sofa and watching something TV or whatever. So it's a bit, but in terms of activities, try to look for something that, as I said earlier, that you can feel a bit enjoyable. And of course, we have all motives here. Then our goals. What is your goal to be like to do any activities? For someone, it's just health. Someone to meet friends, be spending time with them. Someone is what I have been telling, the enjoyment, joy. For someone, this motive can be this, that the doctor said that I need to do this. There are different motives behind this. All these things together, however, they affect our autonomy, competence, and relatedness, which on the other hand relates and creates this our motivation. And it can be intrinsic motivation. It's exactly the same as autonomous motivation that that comes from us, and this controlled motivation would be this extrinsic, that it comes from somewhere else. And all these things together then relates our exercise behavior. So we adopt healthy lifestyle, we are active enough, and also if on the other hand we can like maintain the levels where we are now. But this is like from the motivational point of view, according to this self-determination theory, how this chain of all of these like autonomy, competence, relatedness, how they relate to motivation and our behavior. I have just quickly, couple of studies here I wanted to show quickly about the importance of these competence, autonomy, and relatedness. This was, even though this was, the sample was the school children, but there are lots of evidence that it's not that much age related, that the same things basically can happen with adults as well. But here we followed 3 years, exactly this competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And the sample was collected there in Finland, but that's not these are also this competence and so on. These are not cultural related. So there should be like very similar results no matter where we collect the data. But interesting finding here was that we found, first of all, 4 different profiles in terms of this, how these different competence, autonomy, and relatedness, how they develop across 3 years. And we found that first group here there was large decrease in this competence, like the levels of competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And second, there was a smaller decrease, and then we found this group which has small increase. So these satisfactions, they increased across 3 years. And then there was one group which has a bit larger increase. And when we checked this out of school all activities that the students they do basically after school and before school, maybe mostly across school and they're on the weekends. So these groups which has lowest competence, autonomy and relatedness, the biggest decrease across 3 years, they also, their physical activity levels decreased the most. Here is that the change is about 12 minutes in 3 years. And if we think about that, the same thing happens exactly with the adults. So this a bit opens up the whole question, like why these three elements, why they are so important for this exercise motivation. And it can somehow, of course, more research is still needed, but it somehow opens this whole question, like why adults also, why they tend to be, some adults are more physically active and some of them are not. And it's this sort of motivational factors are behind all this development.
My name is Dr. Williams. This is a very interesting study. If you can just go back, were the activities that the children did connected to their PE activity, or because I'm noticing that you wrote the study, or was it that they did their own interest or non-structured activity? Because I'm finding this very interesting, the actual mean and standard deviation data.
We were like collecting this data with these accelerometers, and we just measured like the whole day activity, and then we checked there like how much they receive on this physical education. But this in Finland, physical education is really structured. So all school classes, they have like 90 minutes of physical education per week. So that's also that's the reason that we didn't find any differences between these, and the reason is that it's really structured. No matter what is your level of these needs satisfactions. So they basically, because they are forced also to take part in this lesson. So basically they, no matter what is your motivation, you will be there in the physical education exactly as any other children. So there we didn't find, and that's a real explanation why there is no difference in this physical education. But then the differences, they come from this out of school activity.
Yes. Okay, thank you. That's excellent.
That second very important part of this is this in the environment, or this motivational environment where we move. And this is really interesting study, like it's some 10 years ago published, but it's still like very relevant. These researchers, they checked like how this stress responsive cortisol hormone levels change. We put the children, this were done also with the school students, but anyways, these sort of things very similar we can expect that happens with adults. And they had two different groups here, randomized control trial here. Like first this task group, they were like focusing this that everyone they enjoy, they support each other, the mistakes are seen as a part of the learning process and no comparison between students. So everyone can just practice their juggling skills for this 30 minutes. And 30-minute session here and over 2 hours. Yeah, it was like 30-minute only 30-minute practice, but the whole session was like 2 hours. And then this ego group was another thing that they were like focusing lots of this competition. They were comparing and testing their like who did, and trying to like rank who was the best and who was the worst in this juggling skills there. And when they measured this cortisol in the very beginning, there was no difference between these groups. But then here with this group that they supported each other and they enjoyed, the cortisol level was significantly lower than compared to this other group, where this competition and this sort of like comparison between students was relevant there. And this was a peak almost in this cortisol levels. Now then, of course, after the activity was over, then it again went almost at the same level. But this is a massive difference between, and tells how important it's this environment when we are active. And these are the ones that exactly relate to this competence, autonomy, and relatedness, which on the other hand relate to this intrinsic motivation. And this is like, in that sense, like very interesting study. And also like going back this task group, which has this like more supportive environment, they felt more this enjoyment and self-confidence and these sort of factors. On the other hand, this other group, they felt this anxiety, stress, shame, all the things that makes us probably not to do again that activity. So this is like very important. And for you, like, you know, when you know yourself that if you are more this type that you want to compete or not, it's important to find the group where you do your activities, or if you prefer to work or exercise alone, it's very important to find this and consider if you want to be like regularly physically active. No, yeah,
sorry, I also have sorry again, I have another good question. This is excellent. I really enjoy your inclusion of these studies. If I can go back, so at the 45-minute point, I'm quite interested. The ego, the group that have the graphical data for the ego, did the study explain or shed any light on why it peaked at 45 minutes over the? I got here over 90 minutes. Like literally halfway.
I think it's like, yeah, this is my most sophisticated thinking, what I can say, because I'm not expert in this, like this cortisol and measurements and so on, but I think the reason is here that the cortisol levels, even though the activity finishes, our body reacts a bit slowly. So that's why it's increases still, even though the activity finished.
Noted.
There. So
almost like a latent effect. Okay, that's
exactly,
great.
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you for the reference. It's really, really interesting.
All senses, like anyways, like if you remember these numbers in the very beginning, that why do we prefer simple solutions to complex problems as this physical activity and exercise? So if you think about like people we create, if someone is not physically active, that hasn't probably happened in past 2 weeks. It has come like across the years, the lifestyle or something you create that across the many years. We cannot think of that if we want to change that it's going to go positive just in 1 week or 2 weeks. So it's a process and learning again, like a new way of living. But answer to that why we want to find simple solutions, because it's simple thing is like it's easy, because we think that we can change like very quickly our behavior, but most often it doesn't work. So that's why these small steps are very important to start with. And if we think of, especially if we think about this self-determination theory and motivation, so these changes are a bit slow, but we need to like teach if we are not in the very beginning, we realize here that we are not physically active enough. We need to first teach not only our body, but we need to teach our mind to accept the new reality. And it's like there is changing behavior. I would say that it takes time and it needs work, but it's not impossible. But all this, if we follow these sort of things, that we try to look for activities that where we get, at least in the very beginning, to get some joy, enjoyment, our chances to make success is a lot higher. And just quickly, like this very important part to be like, if we want to change behavior, that we should try to be positive and small steps. And this is not the best way. There are lots of research behind this, that if we want to change something, like it can be diet or physical activity, exercise behavior, we cannot deny us doing something. I'm sure that every one of us, we know this. If you try to, let's say, change your diet and you said, I'm not gonna eat chocolate for, I don't know, half year. Next time you give a permission to yourself to eat chocolate, probably you buy even more than normally. Because it's like we cannot change our behavior, deny something. It can work for some time. In the very beginning, I gave this example of this, how when people are changing their behavior after New Year's, it normally lasts like 2 weeks, but it's not going to be regular. And this, like, we cannot mainly focusing on this, that we look for to find something that where we feel that we are competent, not too easy, as I said, and also to keep this that we can have choices. Our body doesn't, in the end, it doesn't judge if you go a walk or biking. It doesn't know like which activity we are doing, as long as you are doing something. But it's your mind is the one that probably cares about that. If running is not your thing, try swimming or biking instead. for example, and try to be flexible. Like also, like there always happens something unexpected that we cannot follow the certain, that there should be this flexibility. And if you want to change if it's physical activity, exercise behavior, or this, for example, diet here, we need to be flexible in that sense that if you cannot always follow the same thing, it doesn't mean that the whole thing is ruined. And if you need to be like, of course, understand the whole picture. That's the most important thing. And positive thinking. Think about if your class is half full or half empty. That's very important thing to start with. Try to keep this in mind, how important it's to find that sense comfort zone, that you find something that where you can feel some competence, that it's not always that you can every single time you go do any exercise or activities that you need to say that you didn't do well, or something that you can do well. And also this autonomy, that try to think like with opportunities to have like different kind of activities that you can make choices, but remember not only that the choice is the sofa or activities. And then this, if you enjoy being with other people, of course, try to look for a group or where you can be active together, or is equally fine if you are this type that you want to exercise alone, and maybe that's your own time to relax and whatever. But it's like all of these make this intrinsic motivation, which is very important factor behind our physical activity behavior, especially regular physical activity behavior. But that's my message for today. I hope you got some ideas here that probably what you can do, maybe if you are planning to change your behavior, and what would be the better day to start as this UAE National Sports Day. Thank you very much for listening, and happy UAE National Sports Day. Thank you very much.